Unlike every other day that week, Jesus did not go into Jerusalem that Thursday morning. Neither did he publicly teach, as all his teaching this day would be for the disciples alone. However, he sent some of his disciples into town to prepare the Passover meal and stayed in Bethany until it was time to gather for the ancient meal which symbolized God's covenant with and delivery of Israel. Hi, I'm Louis Marsh, Senior Pastor of River Church. Welcome to another episode of Tales from the Scrypt. We are continuing our journey towards the resurrection of Jesus and that first Easter morning as we move through the week before it. Today, we've reached the turning point, the Last Supper, and that's the title of today's story. The Seder meal is less of a meal and more of a symbolic lesson about the Exodus and God's faithfulness to Israel. Everything in the meal means something. There are 4 cups of wine in the Seder meal. The first is the cup of sanctification. A bit later, they drink the cup of plagues and tell the story of God's plagues upon Egypt. As they moved through the meal that night, everything was proper, everything was traditional, but then Jesus did what he did so often. He changed tradition. When they reached the third cup, the cup of redemption, Jesus flipped the script. Here he instituted another symbolic meal that his followers have celebrated ever since. It's often called the Lord's Supper or communion. Before taking the next cup, Jesus broke some unleavened bread and said, "Take and eat. This is my body." Then he took the cup of redemption and said, "Drink, all of you. This is the blood of the new covenant poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins." After they had shared the cup, Jesus said, "I will not drink of the fruit of the vine till I am with you in the Father's kingdom." Thus the Seder meal ended without drinking the traditional fourth and final cup, the cup of completion. For there would be no completion of his mission short of the suffering that he was about to endure on the cross and the glory of his resurrection. He led his disciples to Gethsemane, a place they knew well. On the way, he again told them that they would deny him and flee from him, and once again they could not or would not believe it. Once in the garden, the agony of Jesus began. He took Peter, James, and John off to pray with them, but soon told them, "My soul is sorrowful, even to the point of death. Stay here and pray." Jesus went about a stone's throw away, and he began to pray by himself. It was a prayer of agony. Over and over again, Jesus spoke to his Father and said, "Father, if you are willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done." Here again, Jesus does what we least expect. He isn't the stoic action hero, yet neither is he the blind religious fanatic. Rather, we see him reasoning with his heavenly Father and at last yielding his own will to the will of his Father. Even now, as he approached the end, Jesus lived out the perfect example of what being his follower, his disciple, is all about. So what was Jesus asking God to spare him from? The horrible anguish of crucifixion? As we'll show next week, it was one of the worst ways mankind has ever devised to kill another man. Yet I don't believe that this was what repelled Jesus so much on that last night. Not that he was looking forward to it, but instead, I believe he was asking his Father if there was some other way to do what needed to be done, if there was a way that could avoid him having all the sin of the world, past, present, and future, poured out upon him on the cross. The fellowship of the Holy Trinity had existed in perfect harmony for all of eternity, yet now, if only for a moment, that unity would be shattered when the sinless Son of God became sin so that we might know forgiveness. In that instance, Jesus would be separated from the Father and the Spirit, and that horrified him in a way that we can only faintly begin to understand. How great was Jesus' horror? Well, Luke the physician shows us by describing a rare medical condition known as hemidrosis. It is the very rare occurrence of sweating blood. When Jesus sweats blood, it's not a miraculous event as I thought it was when I was a kid in high school just learning the Bible. I'd never heard of this, and I thought, wow, that's like some supernatural kind of thing. No, actually, it's not. The truth is that when someone is under so much strain that their blood pressure increases to the point where their blood vessels dilate, and if they don't pass out before this happens, and most people do, but for those that don't, their capillaries actually rupture and blood oozes out of the pores of their skin so they look like they are sweating blood. Quietly, Jesus rose and went to find his disciples. They had not been able to stand with him and instead had fallen asleep. The spirit is willing, Jesus said, but the flesh, it's weak. Jesus said as he awakened them, "Why are you sleeping? Rise up and pray that you don't enter into temptation." His words still hung in the air when Judas appeared out of the darkness. He led a large crowd and quickly rushed to Jesus' side. "Rabbi," he said, as he came to give Jesus the traditional greeting. Jesus stood still, locked eyes with Judas, and said, "Would you betray the Son of Man with a kiss?" The groggy disciples finally woke up to what was going on and began to rally to Jesus' side. Peter snatched up a sword and, in a clumsy move to defend his master, only managed to cut the ear off of Malchus, one of Caiaphas' servants. "Enough," Jesus said, the disgust plain in his voice. So quickly that few saw him do it. In the flickering shadows cast by the torches, Jesus healed the man's ear. Then he said, "Those who live by the sword will also die by the sword. Put your sword away." Jesus asked them why they were arresting him, but they simply tied his hands in silence. At this, the disciples broke and fled, dashed away into the night. The authorities hurried Jesus off to the home of the high priest. They didn't bother to pursue his followers. They knew Jesus was the important one. Yet Peter followed at a distance. He could not bring himself to leave the Lord, yet neither could he bring himself to speak up for him either. He carefully infiltrated the small group by the fire outside the house. Peter quietly moved into one of the circles, trying to avoid eye contact as much as possible. He said as little as possible, but when he did speak, his Galilean accent gave him away. Then Peter's real moment of truth came. He was asked by a servant girl if he was one of Jesus' followers. There was an awkward pause as Peter tried to control his fear, but he caved into it instead. So this man who had told everyone, including Jesus, that he'd never deny him, claimed that he didn't know him at all, and even worse, he didn't just do it once, but twice. Finally, the servant girl accused him of being a follower of Jesus, and Peter did more than just deny it. He called down God's wrath upon himself if he lied. He called the wrath of God down. He felt sick, and he wanted the earth to swallow him. Instead, he heard the sound that made things even worse. He quickly discovered that God had indeed been listening to him as a rooster crowed. And then the words of Jesus cut through his heart, far quicker than his sword had cut Malchus' ear off. Breaking down in tears, he fled into the night that only seemed to grow darker as he ran. Join us next week right here on Tales from the Scrypt for the trials and crucifixion of Jesus Christ. My name's Louis Marsh. I'm the senior pastor of River Church in Parker, Arizona, and I'm so glad you're here. I hope you'll be back with us next week as we reach the ultimate phase of this week. We reach sort of the peak and the crescendo, but more is yet to come. So please give a moment to do that and check out the QR code right over here. It goes to my other podcast, The Ultimate Sacrifice, which takes a look at the sacrificial service to our country of men who have fought hard for us. You might want to check that one out as well. So until next time, thank you for watching. Please give me a like and subscribe if you can. God bless you, and I'll see you next week.